92.7 WMAY.
Springfield's news and talk.
So earlier this morning, while a lot of us were sleeping, including myself, I chose not to stay at the State House until 1 o'clock in the morning. It would have probably been detrimental to my health. But it's still up early this morning, letting you know what happened late last night into the early morning hours with the House passing a amendment to Senate Bill 2226 that prohibits the future sale of certain types of semi-automatic weapons. It also leads to the prohibition of possession of magazines of 12 rounds or more. It expands the firearm restraining order from 6 months to 12 months, and also creates a task force to go after gun trafficking. So to talk about this bill some more detail and why this was necessary, in his opinion, is State Representative LaShawn Ford, a Democrat out of Chicago. It's always great to see you and hear from you. Thanks for taking time with us this morning. Hopefully you got some sleep. Good morning.
Good morning, Bishop. Yes, no need to sleep. We got work to do, but I did get some shut-eye.
So you guys are back at it today, and what do you anticipate happening with this bill after it passed the Illinois House? Is it going to be brought up in the Illinois Senate?
Well, I think that the process is that we passed the bill in the House and we send it to the Senate, and the president will receive it and review it. And I guess he will speak with his caucus about whether or not this is a measure that they could pass in their chamber. Of course, both chambers are different. And so what passes in the House sometimes is not palatable for the Senate. But we believe we sent the bill over simple enough for the Senate to consider.
Now, yesterday, of course, it was rather rapid when it all came together. We've been watching House Bill 5855. There were 3 hearings, 12 hours of debate in different committees throughout the past few weeks. But then in the afternoon hours, we get the note of an amendment to a Senate bill, and it did provide some changes from House Bill 5855. But just in your understanding, briefly encapsulate what the House amendment to Senate Bill 2226 does that passed in the early morning hours this morning.
Well, what it did and what it's going to do if it becomes law, it will ban the sale of assault weapons in the state of Illinois, the sale and manufacturing of these guns in the state. That's a big deal. We are not under any illusion that this bill is the panacea for public safety in the state of Illinois. But this is a smart approach. It will immediately prohibit the sale of assault weapons and extended ammunition, magazines, and rapid fire modifications for guns. That's a step in the right direction, even though we know it's not the panacea and it's not going to stop gun violence in Illinois, but it will help save lives. And that's what we're supposed to do. Do everything with the understanding that it will improve public safety in Illinois.
We're talking with State Representative LaShawn Ford, a Democrat out of Chicago. You were one of the sponsors of House Bill 5855 and also one of the sponsors of the House amendment to Senate Bill 2226 that did ultimately pass the Illinois House. And I want to kind of touch base just a little bit of you sitting next to the speaker last night, sitting next to the governor on the House floor. What was that like, seeing that image in the early morning hours of the debate and the governor sitting there on the House floor? Tell us kind of how that played out.
Well, I think that it's a sign that the governor listens to the will of the people. I mean, this bill passage is not only because Governor J.B. Pritzker and Speaker Welch and members of the General Assembly that voted for it. It's not because they and we wanted it to pass only. It's because we had hearings, meetings, and there were taxpayers that stood up and demanded the action. And so it brought the governor into the House chamber to use his I would say, persuasion and show his support for all those advocates and victims of violence. That's what that was when you have the governor and the speaker both come together in the House to push this measure across the finish line. Illinois is leading in this now.
Representative, the governor mentioned some public polling that happened, but other indications of popularity of a bill could be seen in witness slips. And we've seen each one of these hearings, even the one yesterday afternoon, the witness slips in opposition dwarfed those who support this. And we also saw several dozen proponents of gun control at the State House yesterday. But I've seen in years past thousands upon thousands, upwards to 7,000 people fill the Capitol Rotunda who oppose more gun control. How do you balance that out? How do you make sense of that in the idea that this has broad support versus people saying, well, no, it doesn't have broad support?
Well, when you think about the gun policies and legislation action in government, the NRA has years of what you call organized efforts where they could turn on a switch immediately and bring people to slip in opposition, come to Springfield in support of their measures. When you talk about the counter, you're talking about moms, dads, brothers and sisters, and neighbors and doctors that actually work jobs and they take time off because of the passion that they have and the sympathy that they have for the people that have been victims. You don't turn their switches on the way you turn on the switch of members of the NRA. These people have real jobs that they have to continue to go to. And I'm not saying that the members of the NRA that could just come at the drop of a dime don't. But they're organized, and they've been organized for a very, very long time. And so I hope that what we have today in the passage of this Senate bill, that it's going to begin to organize people that really want more sensible gun legislation and public safety measures passed. This should be our ability to bring people together to fight for better public policy as it relates to gun safety. The bill also, as you mentioned, it's going to also dealing with our border states. And the governor is going to make sure that the state police put the strike force together and work with the federal government to try to cut the flow of illegal guns into Illinois. That's a big deal as well.
And I think there was support for that from Republicans, and we're going to talk with State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer after 7:30, and he mentioned that in the House committee, saying he supports that idea, but he doesn't support the idea of gun registration or potentially turning several million people into criminals if indeed they don't comply with this law of registration or getting rid of magazines of over 12 rounds. The 12 rounds issue, what was it that went from 10 to 12? Can you talk through that process when it comes to that modification there?
Well, when you talk about having automatics, having guns modified to become automatic that could shoot with one pull of a trigger 12 rounds, or before this bill became law, could shoot multiple with one pull. So what we're saying is we're not going to take away the mechanism that allows for a individual to modify a revolver and that could ultimately just shoot one round per pull. We said, why don't we at least, if there's going to be an incident that, as you heard Bob Morgan speak about how there was a pause in the killing and shooting of people in Highland Park because the suspect actually had to change the magazine, and it actually allowed people to escape and get away from the criminal that shot people in Highland Park. So it simply delays and allows for victims to have a chance at living. That's what limiting how many rounds could be shot in a modified gun does. I think that it has to be made clear that our attempt here was a big deal to do two things: to stop the sale of assault weapons in Illinois. So you will hear people talk about this bill will do nothing. Well, if this bill becomes law, it will do something, and it will help save lives. There's no doubt that if you can stop a criminal from shooting 12 or 15 rounds with one pull of a trigger, that's going to help save some lives. So it will do something. And I look forward to constantly talking with members of the NRA and people that may not be totally in support of this bill yet, to find out if there are modifications that we need to do to bring them on board to stronger public policy for gun owners.
Representative, just one last thing on this, and then I want to kind of look ahead at some of your goals and some of your hopes and concerns for the next General Assembly. But when it comes to the issues of Highland Park, the tragedy there, or in Aurora, has anybody been held accountable at Illinois State Police for dropping the ball on not going after the Aurora mass shooter, or dropping the ball on allowing for the suspect in the Highland Park shooting to get a firearm? Has anybody at the Illinois State Police been fired? Have they been held accountable for dropping the ball there?
Well, I can't answer that. I know that the director has been diligent in working with the legislature to make sure that this type of stuff never happens again. I don't know if anybody's been fired, but I know the director has been working with the legislature and the governor to make sure that this, if it was a fault of theirs, that it will never happen again. And so I'm very grateful for Director Kelly for doing that. And I think the governor actually made immediate executive orders, and the House actually passed measures to fix any problems there.
Well, I know the state police also filed new rules. They say clarified some things on their end, but we'll follow up on that issue. New General Assembly starts January 11th. What are you looking forward to? What do you hope for? What do you have concerns about?
Well, I got to tell you, one thing that will be top of order for my legislation is to introduce a bill to deal with people that are have depression and mental health issues, and that will be to entertain and start the conversation on legalizing mushrooms in Illinois.
Yeah, and we've talked about that in the past, and I think you and I are going to definitely have to have that conversation again in the very near future. So looking forward to it. State Representative LaShawn Ford, I greatly appreciate you always being willing to join us and to take the questions, and it's a pleasure seeing you as always. We'll talk again soon, all right?
Thank you, Bishop. Have a great day.
Hey, you too, and Happy New Year, all right? It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's